Original post: my fiance, 30 male, and I, 31 female, have been together for nearly 3 years. We were super excited for a wedding, and that's going to take place 6 months from now. I had a hard boundary against exes in the relationship, and we both agreed to that. No pictures, no contact, no stories, nothing. Prior to meeting me, he was in a serious relationship for about the same time as us. However, his ex, 29 female, one day told him she no longer loves him and they broke up. He was heartbroken and it took him months to heal. Since his ex was blocked, her mom contacted my fiance and told him she had cancer and wanted to meet him one last time. This was a difficult decision considering my boundaries, but I felt really sorry this girl was losing her life so young, so I supported my fiance's decision to see her, but on the condition I'd be in the same room as them. Apparently she had developed skin cancer and the doctor had drawn up a prognosis for her a few months before they broke up. The ex told both of us that she wanted him to lead a happy life with a woman who could share a life with him and wished us well. That's why she lied about not loving him anymore and that she always loved him all this time. She recently died 3 weeks ago and my fiance is a mess. I can't unsee the way that they both held each other's hands and the look of nostalgia and love in his eyes for her, as I was looking on feeling like an outsider. It's so difficult and hurtful to see him cry about another woman who he once loved. I literally can't unhear things that he said to his mom in the kitchen one day. I wonder what life could have been like with her. We could have been a happy family of our own. She wanted kids with me and we could have named her Rose like she wanted. Where does this leave me? Why am I in his life still if he'd rather be with someone else? I promised myself that I'd only ever be with a guy for whom I am his one and only and first priority. I saw that in him before, but now I don't know. Trust me, I'm not a heartless person and I'd rather not put myself in any position where I would consider myself a monster, but this feels incredibly complicated and extremely hurtful to feel like a third wheel in my once happy, thriving relationship. He has been reaching out to me for support and I lend a listening ear, and he has been telling me so many stories from his time with her, and I didn't like one bit of this. My therapist told me while having empathy is important, I shouldn't have to lose myself in my relationship, even if circumstances are hard. 2 days ago, he received a package in the mail and it was from the ex's sister. Apparently it was a photo album of their old times that the ex wanted him to have. My fiance held it so tightly and teared up a little, and I literally broke down on the floor crying, having a panic attack. I think I almost unloaded all what I've been feeling. The third wheel, the unfairness of the whole situation based on my boundaries around exes had been my anger at the ex for inserting herself in our lives for no good reason when both of us were literally so happy with how things were panning out regarding our wedding, questioning where his loyalties lied, and I think I did it in one of the most hurtful ways. I told him that we need to pause our wedding plans for now and wanted a week or two off to think about our relationship. I'm at my sister's place and haven't been able to sleep or eat properly ever since. It's almost as if I'm falling out of love with my fiance and he has been calling me and texting me nonstop. I feel so guilty right now. He had suicidal tendencies years ago, and I'm afraid I might trigger that. He says his ex already died and it's going to break him if I left him too. If I left him too? Emphasis on the two? I'm just done. What the heck am I supposed to do? Now for the update. Update to those of you who have the most vile things to say to me, maybe because you have the baggage of a widower or plain no relationship experience or can't understand that human emotions are complex, your lack of awareness is showing. After the initial shock of those judgmental comments wore off, I decided it was better to completely disregard any judgment that questioned my boundaries and how I handled my feelings. There simply cannot be 3 people in this relationship, and I refuse to believe otherwise. Many of you thought they could do better by teaching me about how marriage vows work, but all of you are forgetting that marriage vows also mean forsaking all others in mind, body, and spirit. She might not be physically present, but he would be in a different headspace emotionally. A part of him will permanently belong to her memories, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not for me. Some of you have different standards for partnership, and that is okay, but what is not okay is shaming those that have them and pretending you are better than me and would have not felt hurt if you were in my shoes. I guess on Reddit, if you can't accept downright emotionally cruel behavior from your grieving partner, you are insecure. Guess what? I'd rather be insecure than accept my partner's headlongs for someone else. There are also some Redditors that are truly a piece of work because they assume that my therapist was stroking my ego. Why do you assume that your opinion matters more than that of a literal professional? LOL and no. It was she who advised me to be flexible about my boundaries when I supported my ex to see his ex. But even she didn't anticipate how bad it got with the whole love confession. Everyone who says that I'm jealous of a corpse or competing with a dead person, I think you're ignoring the elephant in the room. Like, these phrases don't even make sense to me. How is it even possible to be jealous of the dead? The elephant in the room is my fiancé's emotional and relational fidelity, a full 100% commitment to me and only me, which isn't possible if you are dating a freshly grieving widower or someone who is actively longing for another person that isn't, plus current partner. Plus, all those people who are questioning my boundaries have no idea what they are talking about, and rather embody the pick-me, unbothered, non-jealous girls trope on Reddit. And maybe I made a mistake in staying in that room, but I guess also not, because my fiancé said if I wasn't there, he wouldn't have told me anyway because of how complicated it would have gotten. I guess it was the right call after all, no matter how many people like to disagree. And the fact that I knew what was going on in his heart enabling me to leave confirms why I need those boundaries. Had I been firm about him not going to see her, I wouldn't have been left feeling like a divorcee. I don't have the energy to elaborate on how many fond stories I've listened to since her passing, but one thing stands. The fact that he moved on from the initial breakup only because she decided to end things makes me feel like he's only settling for me, and the only reason I am with him today is because of how he couldn't build a life with her. That's a terrible foundation for a relationship where both partners should feel like the first choice. Him reliving what his future could have looked like has damaged any trust that I have had in him beyond repair. I can't unhear things that he has said, and I don't think ever recover from the damage it has inflicted on both of us. Stepping outside of my situation has allowed me to see things differently, and I recognize that this wasn't his fault. He was experiencing grief all over again, but also it wasn't fair to me. It's frankly not the kind of relationship I wanted, which came with such a profound baggage. And you may ask why. Maybe because I do realize that I don't have to set myself on fire to keep others warm and act as if everything is fine. A lot of comments have pointed out how poorly the ex also handled the confession, which shouldn't have even taken place at all. I forgive her because I think she unfairly paid for the loss of my relationship with her life, and she didn't deserve that. I think her last-minute theatrics didn't end well for my relationship because life isn't a movie and there are real feelings involved. So yes, I broke up with my fiancé and it was not pretty. After calling me for the 100th time, I finally agreed to speak with him as I had the time to think about things. Objectively, I had been feeling pretty inadequate, second fiddle, and an emotional dump pretty much. And it has wrecked with my sense of self. I went to her home and gave him the ring he proposed to me with. I told him I don't see him in my future anymore, as seeing him grieve a future life with an ex made me lose all feelings for him. I just feel numb. He started crying hysterically and begged me to stay because now I was breaking up with him the same way his ex once did. This made me cry even harder as he still couldn't see beyond his grief. He asked me and screamed, "Why am I doing this?" He said a lot of cruel things to me which are honestly painful, but things really escalated from there. He said he isn't letting me go and wants us to fix things. That's when I knew I wasn't safe where I was standing. I had to call my sister and his mother at his place to help ease him so that I could leave the house as quickly as possible. As his mom and my sister looked on, here was the exchange. Ex-fiancé: "I doubt you ever had a heart." Me: "Oh, what do you know about my heart when you know nothing other than your own suffering?" Ex: "Someday I hope you'll have the decency to admit how much you regret hurting me just like she did. And maybe, just maybe, life will serve you a different kind of cancer in the next 3 years to teach you a lesson." We all looked in shock and horror, and his mother gave him a well-deserved slap across the face. To say that he instantly regretted that would be an understatement. He cried like a dam broke through. I had to give him his meds for one last time. My sister muttered, "I hope you are ashamed of yourself," and grabbed my arm and took me out of the house. I might just look for a welfare checkup for him as soon as I've gained some sanity and sense of normalcy. I care about him still as a person and certainly don't want to demonize him anymore, but that is not the man that I fell in love with. I guess I have to stay single for a while and find someone who actually is worthy of my time. When I love with my full heart, and I want someone who can appreciate that. Wishing everyone, even the naysayers, peace and love. I'm going to be logging off Reddit to take care of my mental health right now. I'm sorry I won't be here to engage anymore. Again, wishing love and peace to all who cared. Story 2. Update. I'm battling cancer. I'm gay, but I've realized I love my best friend of 25 years, a man. I told him everything and it was the best day of my life. Thank you all. Original post. This is going to be a long post because I'm emotionally flooded and a rambler. I need to get it off my chest. My dearest friend in the world is a man named James. Not real name, all names and nicknames are altered in this story. I tried to describe how great he is, but it's honestly easier just to tell you the story. James and I grew up in the same town, a conservative Christian town in nowhere, USA. The first time I met him was on the playground at school. He saw me sitting alone under a tree and came over to ask me if I wanted to play with him and his friends. I said no, but he noticed I was reading a book about space, the solar system to be more precise. So he sat down next to me and asked me which planet I thought would be the coolest to visit. We ended up talking for the rest of recess about what we thought the other planets might be like, and when we went back to class, he introduced me to his friends as my new friend. We were inseparable from that point on. It was one of those things where the entire town, our parents included, had us married off by age 8 or something. We didn't understand at the time, of course, but I would go on family trips with his family, stay over at his place, and vice versa through most of elementary school, get in trouble for talking during class every day, though not really because the teachers all loved him. This dude can charm his way out of anything. It was unreal. We were the best of friends. When we finally reached the awkward teenage years and dating became a thing, he asked me to the first school dance and I said yes. We sort of started dating by default. I don't think we ever talked about it explicitly, but I just started calling him my boyfriend to other people, and we went with that. Very little changed about our relationship, so we basically did just all the same stuff that we used to do before, except our parents got stricter about the sleepovers, and there was more hand-holding and cuddling. Kissing and stuff was always difficult for me, and I didn't know why, but he never pushed me onto it at all, not even once. The 2 times we tried, he was able to tell very quickly that I was uncomfortable, and he just shut the interaction down by messing up my hair playfully, saying that, enough of that, how about we just watch a movie? I just assumed one day I would get it. Well, I didn't. Sometime around 15 years of age, I started to realize the problem. I wasn't sexually attracted to men. This was a very trying time for me, given the kind of environment I grew up in. This was not acceptable. My parents were extremely religious and extremely anti-LGBT. After about 8 months of identity crisis over this, I decided to muster up the courage to tell James before anyone else. I didn't know what to expect. I was terrified. I went over to his house trembling. He had done what he always did, made my favorite snacks and got the controllers and my favorite game, Diddy Kong Racing, ready to go. He opened the door and gave me a hug and I came in. I was so scared. We sat down and he looked at me for a second before putting his hand on mine and asking me what was wrong, so I tried to tell him. And I got halfway through the sentence struggling to actually say, "I'm gay," before he just interrupted me and said, "You're gay, yes, I know. Is there anything else?" Followed by that goofy smile I love so much. I just froze in place. I asked him if he was mad, and he just laughed and told me he loved me the way that I was, and this is the way that I was. I just started crying and jumped into his arms. It felt like 10 minutes at least. I cried before he finally interrupted me in characteristic fashion, remarking, "However, I will be mad if you let the pizza rolls I made get cold. So how about we stop crying and start eating?" We stayed best friends after that. We never actually had a breakup talk, but we did start to date other people. We talked, hung out almost every day until we graduated, and he went away to a big-name college. The night before he left, he came and picked me up, and we drove around town and hit all of our favorite spots. He drove me back home at 3 a.m. or something in the rain, and I took his hand during the drive home and fell asleep on his shoulder. I remember wondering then for a moment if I should just marry him anyway. But he was going away to college, and I'm not attracted to men, so it probably wouldn't work no matter how I felt about him otherwise. He promised to stay in touch, but I didn't know if that would happen. Well, it did. Obviously, it wasn't like before, but he made sure to call me every week just to check up on me and see how things were going. I went to college closer to home. We talked about how hard college was, whoever we were dating at the time, and whatever drama was going on. During this junior year, my parents found out that I was gay. They did not react well, and I was basically kicked out of my home to save me. My dad going on about me needing Jesus 40 days in the desert like a lunatic. My parents are good people, so this didn't last, and they have more than made it up to me since and worked hard to unlearn their bad programming. But that was an awful time. I did what we always do, and I called James. He talked to me for about an hour, then got his mom to drive up to get me so I could stay in his old room. Then he flew home the next day pretty much just to cheer me up and make sure that I was all right. Vintage driving around in circles singing like idiots and 2 a.m. junk food runs did the trick. I later found out from my mom that he had also gone and confronted my parents and stood up for me and told them that they should be ashamed of themselves, and if they were willing to lose their daughter over this, they were unfit parents and not the second family I thought you were. My parents worship him, so this was effective, and my mom still tells this story to this day. Once again, I remember wondering at that time, will I ever know anyone else in my life who would do this for me? But he was heading off back to college, and he was still a man, so I didn't do anything. Years went by, he got married, I got a long-term girlfriend. We stayed close the entire time. We saw each other a lot less, but it was still great every time he visited, and we had frequent texts and calls. I looked forward to his visits all year. And then tragedy struck. His wife divorced him. I never liked her, but he did. I think she used him for a green card, and he was too sweet to notice, but that's neither here nor there. He came back home, so I saw him a lot more. Obviously, he was crushed, but we got through it together. And then I got the diagnosis at age 27, cancer. There's nothing I can say that describes the feeling, so I'm not even going to try. Decent chance of survival, but I had to start treatment right away. This experience has changed me and my outlook on life more than anything else that's ever happened to me combined. At first, everyone was there for me. I was getting visitors daily, friends, family, everyone. But as the weeks turned into months, it all stopped. Most people, even my friends, started coming once a week, then once a month, then many not at all. When things were looking bad around 7 to 8 months, my girlfriend broke up with me, claiming she loved me, but she couldn't handle watching this. Almost 2 years now, and there's only 5 people who are still here. My mom, my dad, my sister, my BFF, Amanda, and James. I almost can't talk about it without crying, but James is here every day for hours. He may have missed 20 days in almost 2 years due to work-related travel, and even then, he calls me. He comes in and asks how is a moo-moo, which he's called me since we were kids because I like cows, and those were my initials, is doing and listens. He brings my favorite snack and treats when I can have them, board games we like to play, old video games, on handheld so that we can play. He sings to me and shows me pictures of places he's been that I'd like to go, and talks about taking me once I'm better. He sits there and holds my hand in silence so I won't be alone until the doctors tell him it's time to go. Then he does it again the next day. I've never seen him cry or show any sadness. If I even casually say something like, if I get better, he immediately interjects and says, when you get better. He just won't give up on me. The only other person who is there like this is Mom. Even my dad's sister Amanda, who will also have shown up in big ways, are not this consistent. I could write a whole post about how this experience has changed my relationship with Mom as well. She's proven to me that no matter what happened in the past, and what we may have clashed over, she loves me like no one else, except maybe James. My mom is still the #1 all-time James fangirl. She has been attempting to get me to marry him since I was 7 years old. A long time ago, she stopped that. But about 3 months ago, she made probably her first comment of that in around 7 years. I guess there has been a few things that she said. The first was, pay attention to the people who are still here now. They're the people who always will be. They're the people who love you and not just what you can do for them, which sort of set me off on the whole months-long train of thought that led to this post. Amanda and my sister also make a lot of comments about James. Both like him, and Amanda told me a few visits ago that she thinks that I love him. And one reason, none other than relationships that I've worked out, is that the other person can always tell they're #2 everywhere but the bedroom. Then about a month ago, Mom was a little more direct. After James left one evening, she told me, baby, in all my years on this earth, I've never seen anyone love anybody like that boy loves you. I know you don't like it when I talk about this, but trust me, if you let him go again, you're going to regret it forever. I don't know what has changed, but this time when she said that, I just knew she was right. Every relationship I've ever been in has had some problem or thing that has to be worked on. Most of them have, several. The only thing missing here is that I don't feel a strong urge to rip his clothes off like I have with some, but honestly not all, even most of the women I've been with. But even there, it's different. In general, I find the idea of being with a man disgusting, but I don't find it disgusting with him. I like being touched by him and being close to him. He's so gentle. Lately, I even find myself fixated on his lips and daydreaming about kissing him. I'm not that sexual of a person, and I think overall, of the people that I've known in my life, I would be happier with him than anyone else, and it isn't even close. Now the problem is the cancer. Honestly, I'm not really on the fence about this anymore. If I survive, I want to be with him. I am getting better and the doctors are hopeful, but I am not sure if I should tell him now or not. I want to tell him so bad. I want him to know how much I love him. Lovers have come and gone for both of us, but every time I close my eyes and think about times I've felt truly loved and understood and accepted, it's always his smiling face I see. When I think about times that I've felt warm and safe in his arms, I feel wrapping around me like a warm blanket just my size. His voice I hear saying, "Don't worry, Amumu, it's all right," or cracking some silly joke. I want him to know that I want him with me by my side forever. There's nowhere I'd rather be than wherever he is, doing absolutely fucking anything. Cuddling up on the couch, making jokes about stupid movies, playing our favorite video games, talking about life till 2 a.m., driving around in circles while he sings boy band songs like a goofball. I don't care as long as he's there too. I don't want him to know if I survive this, we will be together. That's what I want. That's all I want. He's all I want. But I'm scared to tell him because I don't know what's going to happen. If I don't make it, would it have been kinder just to keep this to myself? If you were him and in this position, would you want to tell me how I feel? Now for the update. Update. If you want the original story, it has a similar title. Here's my update. So tonight I told James. I told him everything. Gosh, I just wish I could relive this night over and over again. I've never been so happy. He came into my room this evening like he always does, greeted me with, "Hello, how's my Amumu doing today?" I told him I was doing well. He told me I looked beautiful, which is not true, but it felt so sincere. Then he started unpacking the stuff he brought me today. I asked him to stop and just come and sit with me because I want to talk to him. He nodded and just came and sat down next to me. "What's up?" he asked. It took me a bit to gather myself. I kept getting distracted by his eyes, how he looks at me sometimes. I don't know how to describe it. I told him I love you, and he just kind of laughed and touched my hand before casually responding, "Oh, I know that. I love you too." In retrospect, it wasn't the best way to start, I guess, since we've said that enough with a different understanding that he didn't get what was happening. He started to get up again to unpack the snacks, and I grabbed his arm and asked him to let me finish. He looked confused, but he nodded and sat back down. And then I did it. I told him everything. I told him about all the times in the past I thought about just marrying him despite my sexuality. I told him my favorite memories of him and how they make me feel. I told him he had always been my best friend and the person I trusted the most. I told him I made a mistake and I should have chosen him. I then basically devolved into reciting the last paragraph of my first post to him. He's the face that I see when I think about being loved, the embrace I feel when I think about being safe. It doesn't matter what we do. If we're together, I'm happy, and he's the only thing that I want for the rest of my life. He basically froze. He said nothing, just looked at me as I spilled everything. I am not sure he even blinked. When I finished and looked up at him, he was sitting there like a statue with his mouth slightly open. Still enough, it was like he forgot to breathe. James always knows what to say, so this was a little unnerving to me. I started to ask him if everything was all right, but before I could finish, his expression broke. He exhaled into a weak, incredibly tender, quivering smile, and he just reached out and pulled me into a hug. I buried my head into his chest, and his arms just wrapped around me. I just melted into him. He was so gentle. It felt so easy, felt so right. Then he started crying, and then I started crying. He's been coming here through 2 years of cancer treatment and never seen him cry till now. He held me for a while, but however long it wasn't long enough. He still hadn't actually said a single word since. I finished talking, but I guess he didn't really need to. Then he finally answered my question with, "Now it is." When he finally pulled away, his face was red from crying, but he just looked so happy. He looked at me for a bit. It was kind of cute because he had a little trouble maintaining eye contact, which he usually doesn't. He was like a little boy again. Then he finally looked at me and just said, "You are the only thing I have ever wanted." Then I started crying again, and he started crying again, and he pulled me to him and held me again. I wish it never ended. A little bit later, once we exhausted our crying capacity, I showed him the post. He made a few jokes about wanting to meet this James guy and about how he had better go and thank my mom for her 20-year wing-womanship, LOL. And then after he finished reading, he kissed me. It felt easy, not scary at all, and just right. He asked me if it lived up to my daydreams, and I chuckled and said yes. Then he said, "I'm not so sure of myself. I think I need some more data," and kissed me again. He is so ridiculous, but his mouth is smooth as butter. Then after that, we started talking, and I guess he told me everything too. He said he'd loved me since we were little kids. Told me he still has every drawing, letter, craft I ever made for him in a safe that he took with him to college and has taken everywhere he's lived. We talked about the day that I came out as gay to him and how he'd figured it out earlier, but he struggled to accept it for months in secret because he had lived his entire life up to that point assuming we would be a family and wanted nothing else. He told me he thought about our last night before college all the time, and he kept hoping that entire night that I'd say something before he left, because then he'd have transferred colleges to stay with me. Told me he actually took a very long way home just to prolong the time when we were holding hands and I was sleeping on his shoulder, and it was to this day his favorite memory. Then he looked at me with those piercing green eyes and said, "For me, there has never been anyone else. He loved me once, and then struggled through a bunch of rebounds, and even though he had learned to bury it and move on with life and was happy in our friendship, his heart had only ever belonged to me. Honestly, I guess I should have known this. My dad told me he was sure this was true before, but I didn't listen. But I was flustered and deeply moved. I joked that he should enter the Olympics as a torch carrier, and he said they'd never have a chance. I'm the greatest there ever was. Ah." We sat and talked and reminisced some more, mostly about when we were kids. I found out some things I never knew because he avoided telling me how romantic some things were for him after I came out, but I also kind of realized I think they felt romantic to me too. Then he sang me some of our songs. His voice is so beautiful. We had another embrace and another kiss. Both still felt divine. I can't wait to have my hair back again so he can pet it like he used to when we were kids. Then I brought up the sex question, and OMG, it was the cutest shit ever. I barely got to say anything before he started tripping over himself like, "Look, I don't even care. I don't even need that. If we need mistresses or something, we can do that. It doesn't bother me." I just want to wake up with you every day. Which was sweet, but then I told him that even though I didn't know how that would go and I might not be able to, I wanted to try with him anyway when I got better. And OMG, he started turning tomato red and could barely look at me. Literally could not even manage to form a sentence in response, just mumbled incoherently before managing to get out, okay, if you're sure. This man has been married and had 6 girlfriends, but he completely just falls all over himself at the thought. God, it was adorable. This is the only thing that I'm still a little worried about, but I do want to try. I mean, I like the kissing, which I thought was completely impossible, and now I know that if that doesn't turn out well, it won't ruin anything, and we'd still be together and just figure something else out for that one need. Then we talked about the cancer. He is so sure I'm going to make it. It is so touching. It took a while to get him to take the other possibilities seriously. When I finally did, and I told him that it's the reason I didn't tell him sooner, he held my hand and told me if that happens, he'd be okay because he'd always know that he was one of the lucky ones because he was mine. Jesus Christ, I almost lost it. Then he said if we don't have that much time left, we better make sure that every minute counts. I said that's pretty hard to do in a hospital. And he replied, what do you mean? We're both here and that makes this the best place on earth. Dear goodness, what did I do to deserve this man? I teared up again and he held me one last time. Then the doctors came in. He kissed me goodnight. We both said, I love you, but it felt so different. It's never felt so good to say or hear those words. Then he smiled at me and left. I was so excited, the first thing that I did was call Mom, and she was just ecstatic. I think she might be happier than me, which is saying something, LOL. As soon as I told her what had happened and that James and I are together, she just started crying and talking about what a good boy he is. How she just knew this would happen, and that she can rest easy now because she knows I will always be loved and taken care of. Plenty of her destiny talk, which usually gets on my nerves, but honestly, I was so happy tonight, so screw it. I'm on board. Maybe it was destiny. I guess sometimes Mom really does know best. I feel like a teenager again. I never thought I'd feel this way again in my life. I never even imagined if I did it would be for a man. God, I love him so much. Now I can't understand what I was ever worried about or why I didn't do this years ago. Thanks so much to everyone who read my story and helped give me the perspective and courage that I needed to finally do what I should have done years ago. Now, as long as my health cooperates, I'll be the one of the lucky ones too because I am his. That's all for today. If you're enjoying this story, please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you.